Howdy, folks. This is just a reminder that if you like this content, you can help me out by liking, commenting, and especially by subscribing. And be sure to hit the bell notification so you always get notified whenever I have a new video. Hope you enjoy this.
Welcome to the Missouri Catholic Conference from the Capitol Podcast, where we take a deeper look at the social and political issues facing Missouri and the Catholic Church and how those impact our public policy. I'm your host and executive director, Jamie Morris. Pope Francis has called for a better kind of politics, one truly at the service of the common good. But as we approach another election season, our nation and even at times our church is as polarized and divided as ever. How are Catholics to respond to the current political debates in truth and in charity? Joining us to discuss this is Jimmy Akin. Jimmy is a senior apologist at Catholic Answers with over 25 years experience explaining and defending the faith. He's also an accomplished author and speaker, and in addition, a podcaster. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Happy to be here. I'm just across the border in northwest Arkansas from Missouri, and I need to get my bio updated because it's now, as of 2 days from now, it's going to be 31 years of experience as an apologist.
Well, there we go. Hey, numbers aren't my thing, so no, I apologize for cutting you short there a little bit by just a few years. So, no, and we won't hold the Arkansas thing against you either. How about we won't? Good. No, we do appreciate you coming on, and you know, I know you're not necessarily in the political arena, as we are with our work here at the conference, but you know, what appealed to us of having you on is, as an apologist, you're very used to debating important, high level, and sometimes very divisive subjects. And I guess just sort of as my first question, have you been noticing, in recent years, a lack of civility when it comes to discussing whether it's, hard issues of the faith or political? Because it seems like the discourse has just gotten worse and worse over the last few years.
Yeah, there has been a notable downtick. Now, I do have experience in the political arena, particularly in the pro-life arena. I used to be the director of a pro-life organization before I was a Catholic apologist. And so I've done a lot of work on the pro-life issue, and there has been a downtick or downward trend in civility lately that's very worrisome. The good news is it isn't as bad as it's been. Sometimes you'll hear folks say stuff like it's worse now than it's ever been. And that is not true. If you go back into American history, I mean, there are periods where things were even more fractious than they are today. Prior to the Civil War, for example, you'd find accounts of senators and congressmen, sitting in Congress and conspicuously sharpening their knives on their boots, and one guy got beaten with one senator got beaten with a cane and stuff like that. And then, of course, there was the whole Civil War experience, sure. And that was all much worse than it is today. So things are bad today, but they have been worse, and they can get better, as illustrated by the fact that through at least much of the 20th century, there was a warmer tone in politics. And so what we're passing through right now is another negative phase. It's caused, among other things, by how deeply divided the country is in terms of its political opinions. And since we have a first past the post election system here in the country, that means that it's going to maximize divisions. There was a presidential aide a few years ago who said that they didn't want, an overwhelming landslide in favor of their legislation. They wanted 51%. Because that means they could get the most of their legislation if only 51% of people agreed with it. And so there are unfortunately some structural things that tends to encourage lack of civility, and the information bubbles that we live within today on social media and so forth foster that. But I try to do my part to be as civil as possible. Since I'm not actively engaged in political work these days, one of the things that I do is I keep politics out of what I do, because if I were going around announcing my political opinions, which I do have, then it would alienate half of my audience, because
Sure.
of the people I'm trying to reach anyway. And so as an apologist, I need to be approachable to people who have a different perspective on things. That's part of
Mhm.
the task of winning people to the faith, is being as approachable as you can. And so I made a commitment some years ago to I'm not talking politics when I do. I'm not talking politics in public. I will talk about principles
Sure.
in public, like pro-life issues and so forth, but I'm not getting, and I, people who are regular followers of me know they can pick up on some of my views.
Certainly.
Like I have a running gag on my Mysterious World podcast where I talk about mysterious issues, and many of them are from different periods in history, and the source material I'm using will mention like how much something cost or how much something was paid, and I'll always update that into modern dollars so people have a sense of what that would be today. And so I'll say, or that would be $20,000 after all the inflation the government has caused.
Yep.
Because the government's in control of the money supply, and that's where inflation comes from. So it's just a kind of little running gag.
Sure.
But I try not to. I make a point of not being partisan in my approach to things.
Well, and obviously it's our approach here as working for the church, is we advocate on principles and policy, but not obviously, don't delve into, political parties or candidates, which is the way it has to be. But, going back to what you said about social media, do you think that's been a big cause of sort of the lack of civility, or is it just that's why we're noticing it more now, that it's visible? Everyone has a platform. Everyone has their little platform they can get on, or a YouTube channel, and to get the biggest audience possible. Sometimes the incentive seems to be a bomb thrower.
I think it definitely contributes. I think there are other factors as well, but I do think social media is one of them. And there's actually been some sociological research done on this. And essentially what that research has confirmed is something that I used to call, and still call, the glass screen effect. This is a name I came up with back when I was a full-time pro-life activist, and I would stand out in front of abortion clinics holding a sign and things like that. And I noticed that people driving by in cars, now some of them were very supportive. I once had a guy who saw me standing out in front of an abortion clinic, and he's coming up in his pickup, and he's going slower and slower and slower, and he's starting to come up on the curb. And I'm thinking, is he going to stick his hand out with a gun or something?
Yeah.
And instead he sticks out his hand and he's got a grape soda in it. So
that could have gone way worse.
Yeah.
Grape soda's good.
So some folks driving by were very supportive, but other folks were not. And I would see them cussing at me and flipping me off and doing things that they would never do to my face if they were standing in front of me with no windshield in front of them. And I noticed that, little kids, if you ever watch little kids like playing around a glass door, they'll be taunting each other in a way that they won't if there's no glass door between them. And so there's something about having a barrier between you and another person, especially glass screens, that encourages rudeness. And what recent sociological research has shown is, the computer glass screen that we have in front of us, or the phone glass screen that we have in front of us, puts a distance between us and other people that makes it safer to be a jerk, and also makes it harder for us to empathize with the people that we're interacting with. And so and then there's all the clickbait incentive that people have to spice things up to get more clicks for their platform. So I think that social media is playing a role here, but I don't think it's the only cause.
Sure. And I guess what do you think are some of the other causes then that are contributing to this? You've touched on some of the political polarization, but
well, like I mentioned, I think our first past the post election system that drives polarization, and so I just think there are a variety of different causes, but that doesn't mean that in doing our own work we can't be civil about it. I try to be as nice and fair to everyone as I can. I try to understand, different points of view, whether I agree with them or not. I try to steel man arguments rather than straw man what other people are saying. I try to find the best version of what they could say and interact with that. Another technique I do is I often will I'll critique ideas in public. That's part of being an apologist, is critiquing ideas. But that doesn't mean I got to get personal about it. So I know some debaters and some figures on YouTube will spend a lot of time running down their people they disagree with. They'll criticize them. They'll say they're stupid, or they'll get indignant and stuff. And I try to just put all that to one side and talk about the ideas. Oftentimes I'll critique an idea without even mentioning who holds it. I'll just say, some people say this, and here's what I think of that.
No, I think that's good. And how do you handle the situation where maybe your debate partner doesn't share that view? I mean, when someone's disrespectful to you, how do you deal with that in the moment?
Well, there are a couple approaches. One is I want to project warmth when I'm in a debate situation. I want to look like I'm friendly, I'm approachable, and I'm having fun being there.
Sure.
And if my opponent is a sourpuss, well, that's just, he's putting himself at a tactical advantage. If you're debating someone who's warm and friendly and funny and approachable and having fun, and you're just being a Mr. Negative, that you're not going to come across as well to the audience. So I find it's just good ethics and good debate skills to apply love your neighbor and try to be as loving as possible all the time.
Now, what would you say to those? Because, and I agree with you on that. And that's, I think, the way we try to conduct ourselves here is obviously you do attract more people, got a smile on your face, you're agreeable. With us, we deal with both parties. So that, takes that out of it. I think we are seen as approachable. But, what I've noticed in recent years is sort of this view, and especially with your background as a pro-life advocate. And my first role here was the pro-life lobbyist for the conference. When you're dealing with issues, on these fundamental principles of life, and whether it's abortion, whether it's gender, whether it's, death penalty, immigration, you also have a group of people that I think mistake kindness for weakness on our side, that think, if you're being nice to someone and you're, granting a premise here and there, or you're trying to be, finding common ground, that's weakness, and that you must just destroy someone or embarrass them. And how do you deal with that? Because, you'll get Jesus flipped tables, Jesus got indignant or righteously angry. And
Jesus lived in a different culture than we do, and people responded differently to that kind of stuff. Also, notice that flipping table things, that precipitated his own death.
Yes.
So unless you're planning on going to a cross, you may want to take a different approach.
Sure.
What I try to do is be it's kind of paradoxical, but I try to be as friendly as possible. And in a debate, I try to be as ruthless as possible.
Sure.
So I want to intellectually stick the knife in, but in the nicest way possible and with a smile on my face.
But I think you're correct that it's a lot of times more effective if you can, and I think it just gives more credence to your argument if you can, at least come to some agreement on some base level on a certain thing, and then you hit them with what the problem is with their point of view or their opinion that they're trying to get across in a debate. I think it does give you more credence,
finding common ground is extremely important because it does two things. The first thing it does is it shows people that disagree with you that you're being reasonable, that you're not just a closed tribal person who's unwilling to think through their perspective. So by finding common ground, you demonstrate to the opposition that you're a reasonable, good person. It also has another effect, which is it identifies material that we don't need to fight about. And
Sure.
so it stops us, if you can point out what we agree on, it stops us from getting down rabbit trails, arguing about things that are going to waste our time. And so
Yeah.
what it does is it clarifies where are the actual points of disagreement. And in terms of the strategy of being nice but being ruthless, that also has a double benefit. By being nice, you are more winning for your cause, so that's rhetorically good.
Mm-hmm.
But by being ruthless, you're showing the strength of your arguments. And that combination of showing strength, but in a nice way,
Mm-hmm.
also is a double benefit for persuasive power.
Well, and I think it's just even a good example because going back to sort of the clickbait nature of things these days, we are getting, sadly to a point where for some people, it's the meanness is sort of the point. And if you can get back to, you can advocate strongly on important issues, whether it's for the church, that you don't have to water it down. You can do the truth, speak the truth in love. And just because you're doing it friendly and treating someone with the respect they're owed, you don't. Yeah, you're not watering down your message still,
Yeah.
and
it can actually be devastating when you do that. You mentioned, like, what do I do if my opponent's being a jerk in a debate? Well, I'm going to stay positive, but that doesn't mean I don't give pushback. There's a famous example from the 1960s when the Soviet premier Nikita Khrushchev was at the United Nations, and he launched into a tirade, and he actually took off his shoe and started pounding the desk in front of him with his shoe. This is a very famous moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's creating this big, dramatic, negative scene. And the guy who was speaking at the time was like the ambassador to the UN from Great Britain. And so how is he going to respond? Because it's up to him to respond to this, explosive tirade that the Soviet premier has just indulged in. And what he did was he used British understatement as a kind of gentle humor to defuse the situation. And what he did was he kind of touched his ear and said, where they have the translator device,
Sure.
and said, I'm still waiting on the translation for that. And it completely defused the situation. It made Khrushchev look like a buffoon.
Yeah.
And he did it in a friendly, understated way. And so I will, if I see an opportunity in a debate, to use a kind of humble, deferential, gentle humor pushback, then I will do that. And it'll point out my mildness will point out the absurdity of what my opponent has just been doing.
Sure. No. A lot of parallels as a parent, a lot of parallels with sometimes dealing with children, very much so. Kind of going back a little bit, into the political realm and kind of our role as Catholics. I think the other thing we deal with a lot here are those individuals, those Catholics that want to be engaged in the political process, but see this division and then just kind of check out. That they'll look, say, at the upcoming presidential election and say, I don't like either of these two candidates, or I don't like the rhetoric. It's all negative, and their inclination is to check out. And I guess, what would you say to those individuals as far as the church's teaching on what to do in those situations where you don't think there's a good option? And your inclination is just say, well, I'm not doing anything, or I'm not voting for anyone, or I'm disengaging from politics.
Well, I think that there's an element of that is fine. I'll tell you what I do now in terms of deciding who to vote for. The church does not require that candidates be perfect. There are no perfect candidates because, unfortunately, our Lord and Our Lady are not available for political office at the moment. So there are no perfect candidates available. And what you do, therefore, is not envision this as I'm endorsing everything this candidate is going to do. You're not. All you can do is use your vote to promote the greatest good possible. And that's what our responsibility is, to do what we can to promote the greatest good possible in society. And that falls directly out of our Lord's command, love your neighbor. If you say, I'm just going to completely check out and have no influence that I could have on our society, then it doesn't sound like you're loving your neighbor. if you're letting the situation deteriorate. So you want to have some involvement, provided you can and it's reasonable. But that doesn't mean you got to follow the day by day, blow by blow of politics.
Sure.
I don't. I find it emotionally taxing to look at very much political discourse. And so what I do is I check in when I can be of service.
Yeah.
So at election time, I'll check in long enough to figure out, okay, what are the issues? Who's standing for what? Who am I going to vote for?
Mm-hmm.
And then once I make that determination, I check out again emotionally, and I don't follow the day to day. And I know who I'm voting for. That's all I need to do. And then I apply my vote, and then I don't really follow the day by day. I'm not a political junkie. So I understand people who just find it emotionally exhausting to watch a lot of political news. And you don't have to do that, but that doesn't mean you should check out altogether and refrain from using the influence that you actually do have.
Sure.
Because if you don't, and enough other people don't, then that means people who are engaged in bad policies are going to have their way, and society is going to get worse, and more babies are going to be killed and stuff like that. And if good men do nothing and allow evil to triumph, the good men are at fault.
Sure. No, but I think that's an important point, because I think for a lot of individuals, and hey, I live in this world, I fall into this trap too, where you think, when you say, oh, you got to be a responsible citizen, it's, I've got to be engaged. I've got to be answering everything on Twitter. I've got to be, engaging in debates 24/7. And that's not healthy. And I mean, and quite honestly, if you really want to affect change, it's, be an informed citizen, vote, be aware of what's going on. But I think going back to your background, in the pro-life movement, I mean, isn't it more effective to then tune out and go do work in your community, go help
Mm-hmm.
the people around you and do that work? Because I think sometimes we just, and maybe this isn't fair, but we kind of view voting as, okay, we've done our civic responsibility and that's it. Or I complained to someone on Twitter, so there you go, I've engaged my civic duty, all done.
Yeah, no, there are practical ways of helping too, and it's a matter of balance. We need things in our lives besides activism,
Mm-hmm.
and things that are positive. And so, one of the criticisms I have of some social media figures that I'm aware of who are, say, in the apologetics world, is I look at their output and it's like they're always negative.
Sure.
It's like they're just negative, negative, negative. And that's not spiritually healthy. And I find, and a lot of the times what they're doing is they're constantly looking down on other people that they disagree with, and they're constantly dissing them. And I'm like, that is not a good spiritual diet. You need positive. Righteous indignation has a place, but it's not the majority of what you should be doing.
Not 24/7.
Yeah, it's like, when was the last time you did a video just because you were excited about something and it was positive and you could say, hey, here's this great information I found, let's talk about it.
Sure.
You need that positivity. And that can happen in other realms too. Besides just, now that's one way of promoting good in an apologetic context, but you can go down to a soup kitchen.
Yeah.
You can do a fundraiser. You can do all kinds of things to engage other people and to do good in the world besides voting. Yeah. So there are a lot of other opportunities to do good, which is, of course, the fundamental moral axiom: do good and avoid evil. Yeah. That's what it all comes down to.
It sounds so simple when you put it like that, Jimmy. Just, it's so crazy that might work. But that, again, as someone that lives in politics, I tell people, what we do is such a small portion of the bigger puzzle. Mm-hmm. And, it's the folks on the ground doing the grassroots work that, it's more fulfilling, but it's also more effective. And so, yeah, while it may occasionally feel good to sit there and post on Twitter and complain to your friends about politics, that maybe other avenues you could be going down, that are a little more effective. So yeah. I understand. But So, as we, start to wrap up here, you
Mhm.
talk about, having other things that interest you. So, I know one thing, we're all big fans here of your mysterious world, but, one of these days we'll have to get you back on to talk about Momo. I don't know if you've discussed
Of course,
Momo ever here in Missouri
I
or,
haven't discussed Momo yet, but I know about Momo.
yeah, see, I know just enough to be dangerous, but
Yeah.
not enough,
For
but,
those who may not be aware, Momo is a name for the Missouri
yep.
version of Bigfoot.
Yep, the Missouri Monster, and so, but that's I know some of your the things you do on the side, and kind of I guess is it fair to say how you kind of keep sane, a little bit along with the apologetics and everything is working on sort of the mysterious questions of the world and such.
Yeah, it's something I have an interest in, and I'm an autodidact, so I'm always researching and teaching myself new things, and it's mentally stimulating to look at mysteries. For folks who may not be aware, you can find out about Mysterious World by going to mysterious.fm, or you can just Google Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and we cover mysteries every week. They can be natural mysteries, historical mysteries, scientific mysteries, supernatural mysteries, paranormal mysteries. And unlike other shows that are mystery oriented, we don't try to just generate wonder and imagine
Hmm.
what if this were true. We try to solve the mysteries by applying faith and reason. We every episode we look at, okay, so what would reason tell us about this mystery, and what would the faith tell us about this mystery? And that means it's also a form of evangelization. Come for the mysteries, stay for the faith perspective.
I love it. See, but I served it up to you. I was ready to give you the plug, and you are a professional, Jimmy. But no, we are big fans here in the office of it. But it's folks that enjoy that sort of thing to get the faith and the reason. So, besides that, is there anywhere else that if our listeners want to read or hear more about Jimmy Akin, that they can reach you?
Yeah, so there are two places I'd point folks. The first one is I work for Catholic Answers, which is a international nonprofit devoted to explaining and defending the faith. Our website is Catholic.com because we thought ahead. And so you can go to Catholic.com to learn all about Catholic Answers and the work I do there. You can also go to my website, which is JimmyAkin.com, which is sort of a hub for everything I do. And to get there, all you got to do, spell my name correctly. It's easier than you think. Jimmy is Jimmy. Akin is just four letters, just like it sounds, Akin. There are no E's, T's, or S's in my name. It's Akin. So just JimmyAkin.com and you'll find out all kinds of great stuff I'm up to.
I love it. Well, I appreciate once again you taking the time to speak with us today. I've very much been looking forward to it, and yeah, and everyone, I recommend go to the website, go check out his videos. Got some good debates recently, with whether it's Protestants, atheists, just very good stuff there. So thank you for joining us today. We greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, this has been MCC from the Capitol. For more information on this and other topics, please visit our website at mocatholic.org. Maybe not quite as easy as AKIN, but mocatholic.org. And from all of us here at the MCC, thank you for listening, and God bless.
And before we go, just one more reminder that if you like what you've watched, you can help me out by liking, commenting, and especially by subscribing. I'm trying to grow my channel, and I'd really appreciate your help. Thank you, and God bless you.